When heaven seems silent, keep praying. God's delays are not his denials. Faith grows in the waiting. Breakthrough often comes at the darkest hour. The enemy wants you to quit before the blessing. Hold on, because when God moves, it changes everything. All right, here's how. Key point 1. God's silence doesn't mean absence. Could be expanded into about 800 words in a natural, conversational, Tony Evans-style sermon segment with personal struggle woven in, flowing toward a strong close. You ever pray and it felt like your words hit the ceiling and bounced right back down? You ever been on your knees, heart wide open, tears streaming, and all you heard was silence? Oh, I know what that feels like. I've been there more times than I can count. There were seasons in my life when I prayed with everything in me, and God didn't seem to answer. Not a whisper, not a hint. And I started to wonder, Lord, are you even listening? I remember one particular season that just about broke me. My ministry was struggling. My family was facing challenges that I didn't know how to fix. Bills were stacking up, doors were closing, and it felt like every prayer I prayed just disappeared into thin air. I would wake up in the morning, open my Bible, ask God for direction, and nothing. I'd go to bed at night pleading with him to step in, to change something, and still nothing. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and in that silence, the enemy started whispering, he's not there, he doesn't care, you're on your own. But you see, I learned something in that season, and it's why I'm standing here telling you not to give up praying until you see God move. Just because God is silent does not mean he is absent. Silence is not abandonment. Silence is not rejection. Sometimes silence is preparation. Sometimes silence is preparation. You see, when God is silent, he's still speaking, just not in the way we want him to. Sometimes his silence is him saying, I need you to trust me without all the details. Sometimes his silence is him doing work behind the scenes that you're not ready to see yet. Just because you don't hear him doesn't mean he's not hearing you. The Bible says in Psalm 34:15, the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cry. That means even when heaven feels closed, God's ears are open. I think about Daniel in the Old Testament. He prayed for 3 weeks without an answer, didn't know why, didn't understand what was happening. But on the 21st day, an angel showed up and said, Daniel, from the first day you prayed, your words were heard, but there was a battle in the spiritual realm. See, some of y'all think God's ignoring you, but in reality, there's a war going on over your prayer. His silence might just be a sign that something is being fought for in the unseen. I remember the moment my season shifted. It wasn't sudden fireworks or lightning bolts from the sky. It was a small opening, a conversation I didn't expect, a door I thought was shut swinging wide. And when it happened, I realized something. God had been there the whole time. Every tear I cried, he counted. Every sigh I breathed, he recorded. And every prayer I prayed, he stored up until it was time to release the answer. But I also realized if I had quit praying in the silence, I would have missed what he was preparing for me in the quiet. God's silence forced me to grow deeper roots in faith. It stripped me of the illusion that I could control the timing or the outcome. It taught me to lean not on my understanding, but on his promises. And it made me see that his presence is not proven by how loud he speaks, but by how faithfully he sustains you when you can't hear him at all. Some of you are in that silent season right now. You're tired. You've been praying for your marriage to heal, your child to come back home, your health to be restored, your breakthrough to come, and it's been quiet, too quiet. But I came to tell you, don't mistake God's silence for his absence. He's closer than you think. He's working in ways you can't see, arranging things you don't know about, aligning people and places for the right moment. I learned in my own struggle that God doesn't waste silence. Silence is the space where faith is forged. Silence is where you decide if you believe him for who he is, or if you're only chasing him for what he does. Silence is where you grow into the kind of believer who can say, although he slay me, yet will I trust him. When my breakthrough finally came, I looked back on all those silent days and realized they weren't empty. They were holy. God was pruning me, stretching me, shaping me into someone who could handle the blessing when it came. And friend, that's exactly what he's doing in you. So if you're tempted to stop praying because it feels like God's not there, I want you to remember this. The teacher is always quiet during the test, but the quiet does not mean the teacher left the classroom. He's still there, watching, guiding, waiting for the right moment to move. Don't quit. Don't let the silence scare you. Pray until the walls fall. Pray until the chains break. Pray until the night turns to morning. Because when God finally breaks the silence, everything changes. And when he moves, you'll know why he made you wait. If you want, I can now move on and expand key point 2 in the same style so the whole speech builds in momentum. That would give it a real sermon. All right, here's an 800-word expansion of key point 2. Delays are divine setups for greater glory, written in a flowing sermon style tone, with personal struggles woven in and a strong ending line. You ever notice how God has a way of taking his time? Oh, I'm not talking about our time. I'm talking about his time, because our time is urgent. Our time is, Lord, I need this fixed yesterday. But his time is eternal, perfect, deliberate. And sometimes means he will let a delay sit right in the middle of your prayer life. Not to punish you, but to set you up for something bigger than you can see right now. I remember a season in my own life when I thought the delay was going to break me. Years ago, I had prayed for a door to open that seemed like the perfect opportunity, a ministry platform that I believed would allow me to impact more lives, to reach people who needed hope. I was ready. I was eager. I had the message, the passion, the fire. I thought all God needed to do was turn the key and let me through. But the door stayed locked, not just for a week or two, for years. Every time I thought it was about to open, it slammed shut again. At first, I thought maybe I had misheard God. Maybe I had aimed too high. Maybe this wasn't for me after all. But as I wrestled with him in prayer, as I stayed in his word, I began to see something. Delays aren't always denials. Sometimes they are divine appointments, hidden in time, waiting for the right intersection between your readiness and his plan. See, God's delays are never wasted. He uses them to prepare you for what he's preparing for you. If he gave you the blessing too soon, it might crush you instead of grow you. If he opened the door too early, you might not have the character to stand once you walk through it. And that's exactly what I realized in my own life. In that waiting season, God was chiseling away at my pride, deepening my dependence on him, and teaching me lessons I never would have learned if he had just given me what I wanted right away. I think about Joseph in the Bible. God gave him a dream as a teenager, a dream of leadership, of influence. But before Joseph ever sat on a throne, he sat in a pit in slavery and in prison. It looked like delay after delay after delay, but each one was a setup. The pit positioned him for Potiphar's house. Potiphar's house positioned him for prison. Prison positioned him for the palace. What looked like detours were really direct routes in disguise. That's how God works. He'll delay the answer to your prayer so that when it comes, no one will be able to say it was coincidence. Everyone will know it was him. And the glory will not go to the timing or the strategy or the connection. It will go to the God who orchestrated it all. Back in that season of my life, I didn't see the setup while I was in it. I just saw closed doors. I saw opportunities pass me by. I saw people I thought would help me walk away. But when the delay finally ended and the door God wanted me to walk through finally swung open, I realized something powerful. If he had opened it when I first asked, I would have walked through with an unprepared heart. But because he made me wait, I walked through with a deeper faith, a greater humility, and a story that would encourage others still waiting. Sometimes God will delay your healing so that when it comes, your testimony will set other people free. Sometimes he will delay your promotion so that when it happens, it will be undeniable that he did it. Sometimes he will delay the relationship you've been asking for so that when it comes, it won't be built on your loneliness. It'll be built on his purpose. So don't despise the delay. Don't curse the waiting room. Because what feels like wasted time is often preparation time. And if you could see what he sees, you'd be thanking him for the pause. I can't count how many times now, looking back, I've thanked him for not answering me when I wanted him to. There were jobs I wanted that I didn't get. And later I found out they would have drained me dry. There were connections I tried to make that didn't work. And later I saw that those connections were toxic. There were paths I begged him to open that stayed closed. And years later I realized they would have led me away from his will. The delay is not God forgetting about you. The delay is God loving you enough to protect you from less than his best. He's not just concerned about getting you to the blessing. He's concerned about keeping you there once you arrive. And that takes preparation. That takes patience. That takes trust. So if you're in a delay right now, if you've been praying and the answer seems stuck somewhere between heaven and earth, I want to tell you, don't lose hope. The delay might just be the very thing that makes the blessing worth receiving. And when it finally comes, you'll understand that God didn't hold it back from you. He held it back for you, because what he's setting you up for will be worth every minute you had to wait. If you'd like, I can now carry this same momentum and expand key point 3 in the exact same style, so the speech builds into a complete, powerful sermon arc. That way, each section ties directly into the next. Here's an 800-word expansion of key point 3. All faith matures in persistent prayer, written in a natural sermon-style flow with life experiences and a strong closing line. Faith doesn't grow in comfort. Faith doesn't get stronger when everything is going your way. Faith matures in the grind of persistent prayer. When you've been asking God for something over and over again, and you haven't seen it yet, but you keep showing up anyway. That's where real faith is forged. I'll never forget a season in my life when my faith was tested in a way that shook me to my core. It wasn't one big crisis. It was the kind of drawn-out trial that wears you down little by little. I was carrying a heavy load in ministry. My family was under pressure. There were financial struggles that made it hard to sleep at night. And to make matters worse, it seemed like every time I prayed, heaven stayed quiet. I was showing up, but I wasn't seeing results. I remember getting up early one morning, worn out from the weight of it all, and I told God, Lord, I've been faithful. I've been praying. I've been serving. And it feels like nothing's changing. You ever been there? You start to wonder if maybe you're doing something wrong. Maybe you missed a step. Maybe God's not listening. That's when the enemy loves to slide in and whisper, what's the point of praying if nothing's happening? But see, here's what I learned. Prayer is not just about getting God tagged. Prayer is about God shaping you in the process. When you keep praying and pressing, even when you're not seeing results, God is deepening your faith. He's teaching you to trust his heart when you can't trace his hand. Persistent prayer keeps you connected to the source, even when you don't understand the situation. I think about the widow in Luke 18, the one Jesus said kept coming to the unjust judge day after day, asking for justice. The judge didn't fear God and didn't care about people, but her persistence wore him down until he finally said, I'll give her what she wants just to get her off my back. Now, if an unjust judge will respond to persistence, how much more will a loving father respond when his children keep coming to him in faith? In my own struggle, I realized God wasn't ignoring me. He was maturing me. Every day I kept praying, I was learning patience. Every time I didn't see the answer, I was learning endurance. And every time I fought through the temptation to give up, my faith muscles were getting stronger. It's like working out at the gym. You don't build muscle by lifting a weight once and walking away. You build muscle by showing up again and again, even when it's hard, even when you don't feel like it, even when you're sore. Persistent prayer is the same way. The repetition, the discipline, the staying power, that's what matures your faith. I remember one particular breakthrough that didn't happen until after years of praying. It was about a situation in my family. I had been lifting up to God for so long that honestly I had moments where I thought, maybe this is just how it's going to be. But something in me refused to stop asking. Every time I got discouraged, I'd remind myself of Philippians 4:6, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication. With thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And I kept making them known, kept knocking, kept seeking, kept believing. When the answer finally came, it wasn't just about the blessing itself. It was about what God had done in me during the wait. My faith had a depth to it that it didn't have before. I could trust him in ways I couldn't before. And here's the truth. If he had answered my prayer the first time I asked, I wouldn't have developed that kind of faith. Persistent prayer had done something in me that instant answers never could. Some of you right now are tired of praying for the same thing. You've been on your knees for your children, for your marriage, for your health, for your breakthrough, and you're tempted to throw in the towel. But what you need to understand is this: God's not just working on the thing you're praying for, He's working on you. And the longer you stay in the place of prayer, the more your faith grows roots that can't be pulled up by the storms of life. Don't be fooled. Unanswered prayers are not wasted prayers. Every prayer you pray is a seed, and seeds don't sprout the moment they hit the soil. They have to be watered, nurtured, and protected. That's what persistent prayer does. It keeps watering the seed until God says it's time to break the ground. I've lived long enough to tell you, some of the greatest blessings in my life didn't come because I prayed once. They came because I prayed through. There's a difference. Praying once says, God, I'm interested. Praying through says, God, I'm committed. And when you're committed, God can trust you with answers that only come to those who refuse to quit. So if you're tired, if you're weary, if you're ready to give up, I need you to dig your heels in. Keep talking to God. Keep pressing in. Keep showing up in the prayer closet even when it feels like nobody's listening. Because I promise you, your faith is growing even if you can't see it. And when the answer comes, you'll realize the real miracle was what God did in you while you kept praying. Here's an 800-word expansion of key point 4. A breakthrough often comes after the hardest test, in a sermon-style flow, with life struggles woven in a strong closing line. Sometimes the darkest part of the night is right before the sun comes up. And I've learned in my walk with God that the moment when you feel like you can't take one more step, when you're convinced you're at the breaking point, is often the moment right before your breakthrough. That's not just something I've read in Scripture, that's something I've lived. I remember a season when everything in my life seemed to be collapsing at once. My health was shaky, my finances were tight, my ministry was under pressure, and my family was carrying burdens that I couldn't lift on my own. It wasn't one problem I could fix. It was wave after wave after wave until it felt like I was drowning. And the crazy part was I had been praying more in that season than ever before. I thought more prayer meant easier days. But instead, the pressure turned up. The trials got heavier, and the silence from heaven seemed even louder. I'll be honest, I came close to quitting. Not quitting on God, but quitting on the fight. I thought, oh Lord, if you were going to move, you'd have moved by now. Maybe this isn't meant to change. Maybe I'm just supposed to live with it. But right in that place, God began to show me something. The hardest test often comes right before the blessing because the test is what proves you're ready to handle it. It's like in school. You don't get promoted to the next grade without passing the final exam. And those exams aren't easy. They're designed to see if you've learned what you were supposed to learn. Spiritually, it's the same way. God will often allow the most intense pressure to come just before He releases a breakthrough. Not because He's cruel, but because He's preparing you to walk into the blessing with the strength to hold it. I think about Israel standing at the Red Sea. Pharaoh's army behind them, the water in front of them, and nowhere to go. That was the hardest moment in their journey so far. But it was also the moment right before God split the sea. What if they had given up? What if they had turned back? They would have missed the miracle that was just on the other side of their test. That's exactly what I realized in my own. The season I thought was going to break me was actually the season that birthed something in me. The days I felt like I couldn't pray another prayer were the very days God was strengthening me for the thing He was about to do. I didn't know it then, but my hardest test was the door frame to my breakthrough. And let me tell you, the enemy knows this too. That's why he fights so hard when you're closest to victory. He wants to wear you out, to drain your hope, to get you to lay down your faith right before God shows up. Because if he can get you to quit before the finish line, you'll never see what was waiting for you. There was one night in particular when I thought I had reached my limit. I had just gotten news that felt like the final blow in a long list of disappointments. I sat there in the dark, feeling like God was far away. And I heard him speak in that still small way he does, not audibly, but deep in my spirit. This is not the end. You're closer than you think. I didn't know how close I was, but those words kept me from walking away. And within weeks, doors opened that I had been knocking on for years. Prayers I had been praying for so long started being answered one after another. Here's what I learned. The breakthrough didn't come because I was strong. It came because I didn't give up in the weakest moment. And that's the key. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to hold on one more day. Take one more step. Pray one more prayer. Some of you listening right now are in that place. You're at the hardest part of your test and everything in you wants to walk away. But if you could see what God has on the other side, you push through the pain. You press past the tears. You keep fighting even when it doesn't make sense. Because what he's doing is not just for you. It's for the people who will see your testimony and believe him for themselves. I've learned that God's greatest miracles are often on the other side of the greatest trials. And sometimes he lets the fire get hot so that when he brings you out, you know, without a doubt, it was him who saved you. So don't stop in the test. Don't let the pressure convince you that God has left you. You may be one prayer away, one act of obedience away, one day away from seeing him split your Red Sea. Because your hardest test might be the hallway to your greatest breakthrough. Here's the 800-word expansion for key point 5. The enemy attacks most before victory, written in a flowing sermon-style tone with personal experiences woven in and a strong closing line. One thing I've learned walking with God is this. The enemy doesn't waste his ammunition on people going nowhere. If you've been feeling like the attack on your life has been unusually heavy, it might be because you're closer to victory than you realize. The enemy turns up the heat when you're on the verge of stepping into something God has promised you. I can't tell you how many times in my life I've been right at the edge of a breakthrough and suddenly found myself in the middle of spiritual warfare like never before. It's like the enemy could smell the blessing coming, and he did everything in his power to discourage me, distract me, and drain me before I could get there. I remember one particular season when God had opened a door for a major assignment in ministry. It was something I had prayed for, prepared for, and waited on for years. I could see the finish line. I was almost there. And that's when everything seemed to fall apart. People I trusted turned their backs on me. Unexpected expenses drained resources I had been saving. My health took a hit. I was dealing with emotional weight, physical fatigue, and mental battles all at the same time. And in the middle of all that, the enemy started whispering, if God really wanted you to do this, it wouldn't be this hard. Maybe you misheard him. Maybe you should just quit before you embarrass yourself. It's in those moments that you have to remember. The enemy doesn't fight what doesn't threaten him. If he's fighting you this hard, it's because there's something on the other side worth fighting for. Think about Jesus before the cross. Right before the greatest victory in history, the resurrection, he faced the greatest pressure in Gethsemane. The enemy would have loved to convince him that the pain wasn't worth it, that the cross was too much, that the mission was impossible. But Jesus pushed through the agony of that night because he knew the joy that was set before him. I've seen the same pattern in my life over and over again. The moments when I felt like quitting have often been the moments just before God moved in a way that changed everything. That's why the enemy attacks so fiercely right before your blessing. If he can break your spirit before you get there, he doesn't have to fight you once you arrive. There was one time I almost gave in to the pressure. I was sitting in my office late one night, staring at all the problems piling up. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. I don't have it in me. But something inside whispered, don't stop. This is not the end. It's the fight before the finish. I didn't feel strong, but I made a decision that night to show up the next day anyway. And within weeks, God answered prayers I had been praying for years, and doors opened that I could never have forced open myself. Looking back, I see it so clearly. The attack was the enemy's last attempt to keep me from stepping into what God had for me. And I almost fell for it. That's why I tell people when it feels like everything is coming against you at once, don't assume you're going the wrong way. It might just be proof you're going exactly the right way. The enemy doesn't just attack to destroy. He attacks to distract. He'll try to get you so focused on the storm that you forget about the shore you're heading toward. He'll send discouragement, division, confusion, and temptation right before your victory, because if he can get you to doubt God's goodness now, you'll forfeit what was already yours. I think about the children of Israel again. Right before they entered the promised land, they faced giants. That was no coincidence. The giants weren't a sign that they were in the wrong place. The giants were a sign they were in the right place, about to step into what God had promised them. That's why I've learned to look at heavy attacks differently. When the pressure ramps up, when the opposition gets loud, when it feels like you're surrounded, that's not the time to retreat. That's the time to dig in. Because if the enemy is fighting you this hard, there must be something on the other side he doesn't want you to have. And friend, you have to decide that no matter how intense the fight gets, you won't let him have the satisfaction of seeing you give up. You may be weary, you may be wounded, but if you can hold on through the attack, you'll step into the victory that made the enemy so nervous in the first place. So if you've been under heavy fire lately, take heart. You're not losing. You're close. You're not abandoned. You're advancing. And the very fact that the enemy is coming at you like this should be a sign that you're right on the edge of something God has been preparing for you. Because the enemy always fights hardest when he knows you're about to win. Here's the 800-word expansion for key point 6. A God's move will exceed your expectation. Written in a natural sermon-style flow with personal struggles woven in and a strong closing line. One of the most humbling things I've learned about walking with God is that when he finally moves, he never just meets the expectation. He surpasses it. We pray for a little light and he gives us the sunrise. We ask for a drop and he sends a flood. We ask him to just get us through and he brings us out in a way that leaves people shaking their heads saying, only God could have done that. I can't tell you how many times in my life I've come to God with a small prayer because my faith was tired. I didn't ask for big miracles. I just asked for enough to survive. And yet when he finally answered, the blessing was so much bigger than anything I had dared to imagine. I remember a time when my back was against the wall financially. Bills were stacked high. Opportunities were drying up. And I was just praying for God to help me make it through the month. I wasn't asking for abundance. I was just asking for survival. But when God stepped in, he didn't just make the payment. He opened a door that provided stability for years. The very thing I thought would sink me became the setup for a blessing I couldn't have even put into words. That's how he works. We think we're asking for something big, but compared to what he has planned, our prayers are small. Ephesians 3:20 says he is able to do exceedingly, abundantly above all we ask or think. That means even at your most faith-filled moment, you still can't outdream God. I've learned this in ministry too. There were seasons where I prayed for God to just keep the work afloat, just enough resources, just enough help, just enough encouragement to keep going. But when he moved, he didn't just keep the ship from sinking. He expanded the reach, increased the influence, and brought people into my life who were answers to prayers I hadn't even prayed yet. He was working on levels I couldn't see while I was stuck in the middle of my struggle. And here's the thing. Most of the time, when God moves in ways that exceed our expectation, it's because he's been preparing something bigger while we were praying for something smaller. We see the problem in front of us, but he sees the future beyond us. We pray about a moment, but he's already arranging a lifetime. There was another moment in my life that drove this lesson deep into my heart. I had been praying for reconciliation in a broken relationship. I just wanted a conversation, a chance to clear the air, maybe restore some civility. What I didn't know was that while I was praying for a simple dialogue, God was preparing a complete restoration, not just between us, but in the lives of people connected to us. The healing that came didn't just fix one relationship, it broke a chain of division. I walked away from that moment realizing that my prayer had been too small for the God I serve. And maybe that's where you are right now. You've been praying for God to get you through. You've been praying for him to just make it stop hurting. You've been praying for him to just open a little door. But I'm telling you, when God moves, he's not interested in a just enough. He's the God of overflow, the God of abundance, the God who leaves you saying, I didn't see that coming. But here's the catch. The bigger the move, the longer the preparation. Sometimes the reason it feels like it's taken so long is because what he's planning is so much greater than what you're expecting. If all you asked for was a cup of water, he could have answered quickly. But if he's preparing a river, it's going to take a little more time to get it flowing. That's why I've learned to trust his timing, even when I don't understand it. Because every time I've looked back after God moved, I've been able to say, and now I see why he waited. The wait wasn't because he forgot me. It was because he was preparing something that would blow my mind. So if you've been praying and wondering why the answer hasn't come yet, don't lose hope. You may be asking for something that will meet your need, but God is preparing something that will transform your life. And when he finally shows up, you'll realize the delay was worth it. Because when God moves, it will be more than you prayed for, bigger than you dreamed, and better than you imagined.